Hi, Lauren. Thanks for being part of this conversation today.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we've done some work together across the year in a few different ways. Just to let everyone know, you helped moderate a viewing of Screenagers, a community viewing, and then hosted a separate conversation talk on how parents can sort of help navigate their child's social media usage. And we thought in this third sort of final installment, as we on ramp to the end of the school year, it might be nice to query the community to see what questions they had about social media, cell phones, screen time, and pre-record this so that community members can view this at their leisure.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I'm also happy to end with some thoughts about where we are as a school district with our cell phone policies and our thinking and regulations and those type of things too.
Terrific.
For those who haven't had the opportunity to engage with you yet, here's a quick bio. Lauren's a licensed psychotherapist and the founder of Wellbeing Therapy Center with locations in Montville and Short Hills. She's dedicated her career to helping parents and schools address the impact of technology and social media on youth mental health. You earned your bachelor's degree from Cornell University and a master's degree from Montclair State University, where Lauren received the Dean's Leadership Award. She's presented on this critical topic more than 100 times at schools across New Jersey, offering invaluable guidance to parents striving to foster a healthy balance of tech use in their families.
Thanks.
We got a good response to our outreach for questions. And so while we might not have time for everyone's questions, there are certainly a lot of topics here that sort of transcend individual questions, and like there's points of intersection and connection. So we'll try to take those up as a way of making sure everyone's topics are addressed.
Great.
The first question I thought was a really interesting one. It's about the idea of how do you handle reading your child's text messages? So I know that's something I applaud this parent for engaging in that practice, I think. But she says, I wonder if that sends the right message. When are they allowed privacy in conversations with friends? When this parent was in sixth grade, she would pass notes, but parents wouldn't read them. So it's sort of like, what's the proper way to build trust with kids and independence, but also monitor their online activities?
Yeah, great question. I loved passing notes. I remember folding them up into fun shapes too. So, I always like to just remind parents that your kids' phones are not their journal or diary, right? So that's very different. If they have a journal or diary, then that is for them, and we shouldn't read it. But their phone and their communication device, with friends is different. So, I like to use the example of, when we were kids, our parents might eavesdrop a little bit by the door when we're having phone conversations, just to listen in every now and then. Or my mother-in-law tells a story where she would, quietly pick up the other phone in the house on the same line and listen in just a little bit, to see what's going on. And that's really what we want to be doing, is we're just taking a peek to see what's going on. Now, if you're concerned that your kid is involved in something risky, dangerous, or hurtful, then you might be looking a little more in depth to see what's going on, right? So you might be spending more time looking through. You might do it a little more frequently until a certain situation passes. If your kid's doing really well and you don't have concerns, it doesn't need to be a daily thing at the end of the night that's like your entertainment, at all. It's really more every now and then you're picking it up and you're just kind of looking to see what's going on, and they should know you're doing it, right? It's not secretive. We want our kids to know that we are going to sometimes look at what they're doing online and look at their text messages. We're not doing it to invade their privacy, but as their parent, it's our job to keep them safe and protect them. And sometimes I'm going to look and see what's going on and, what the situations, are like that you're involved in. Doing that actually, hopefully, will keep your kid in line to a certain extent. So if they know you're going to be picking up their phone and looking at it every now and then, they're less likely to actually engage in inappropriate behavior. And we want that.
Yeah, I like that idea that it's somewhat situational too, not a one size all fits approach. Yeah.
Exactly. So to give you an example, my son is a junior. He's really been very responsible. He hasn't been involved in any, concerning issues behaviorally, or with mental health or academically. And so I haven't really looked at his texts in a while. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, the phone has to charge outside of the bedrooms in my house, so he was sleeping late on the weekend. And I was like, I really haven't looked in a while. Like, I'm just going to peek through to see what's going on, who he's talking to. And he knows I do it sometimes. There was nothing there except just, funny stuff that made me smile because I know he's connecting with his friends. My daughter is in 5th grade. And so she doesn't yet have a device where she's communicating with friends, but she, I walk up to her when she's watching YouTube, that's how I'm kind of observing and guiding what she's doing. So we have a conversation about what she's watching, what she's allowed to watch, etc.
So talk to us a little bit, or me a little bit, about when you recommend children have phones, and then add the element of social media onto that, because a lot of questions were about wanting recommendations for phones and ages, and like when those things are appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. So I really think elementary school is too young for smartphone devices. And so we want to try to delay smartphones until at least middle school. When they get a smartphone, the key is that you keep it a phone and you keep it very basic, right? So we really have there are 2 different categories here. And one is the access to the phone as a communication device. And then there's social media and the internet. And so we want to delay access to social media and the internet on a handheld device as long as possible. So if you can delay social media till 13, 14, 15, 16, maybe you could, then that we know is going to be better for your child's overall mental health and well-being. So when you give them a device for the first time, make sure that there is no internet browser on it, that there is no social media on it, and that you're telling them you can use this to text your friends and FaceTime your friends. You could listen to music, maybe play some games. But when we give kids, unlimited access to social media and the internet, that's when we really see, potentially harmful effects.
Yeah. So many questions about that surface that I think your answer really addresses many people's concerns. Yeah. This was an interesting question because I think it spoke to social pressures and how you navigate that as a family. So one question we received, Lauren, was about the best ways to speak with and or approach parents and caregivers in your child's friend group to find things like common times for group chats and game use. So some of my child's friends are up until all hours playing group games like Roblox, while my child's bedtime is like 9 or 9:30. And so like I think maybe what that parent is getting at is the social pressures that swirl around that.
Yeah, there are absolutely pressures, and there are going to be a lot of pressures, depending on what stage they're in. So I think it's really important to get very clear about what your family values are and your guidelines and why they're in place. So this parent has a 9:30 bedtime. That's really smart. Their kid needs to get a great night's sleep. We want to cut screens off, before bedtime to wind down. And so, letting your child know that that's the clear boundary and really sticking to that for the reasons that you have, and you can explain those reasons. Now, you might want to ask your child, is there another friend that also gets off at a similar time? Like, I bet you're not the only one. Hope not. Because if that's the case, you might have an ally there, right? So you might be able to connect with that parent, get on the same page with some of these tech guidelines that you share, because it's helpful for your child to know you're not the only one, right? If that specific friend group, if they really are all staying up late, a little sleep deprived, and your child is frustrated and disappointed, you really have to be open to that conversation with them. And I get it. It is frustrating. I know it sounds like you're saying you're the only one out of this small group that has to go to bed at this time, but we're doing this because we really know it's the right thing for you. And that's that. We draw that line. Maybe there's another group of friends who play at a different hour and do have similar guidelines. So as we're kind of helping our kids navigate these social situations, you want to be looking at a parent as what other families are sharing values with us. Those might be families that, are great to develop those relationships with even further, because it's easier to do that in a community with people that share those same types of guidelines.
How do you endorse, or how would you recommend helping families and kids think more creatively about how they might spend their free time outside using the phone? So, a couple of trending questions were about asking for advice on how to encourage younger children to entertain themselves without screens when screens are seemingly everywhere.
Yeah, such a good question. So first of all, in your homes, put the screens away. So parents should absolutely control iPads, laptops, computers, especially for young, elementary age children. Make sure that they are charging out of sight with a password that only the parent knows. That's really important. Once a child does not have a screen in front of them that's drawing them in, they will absolutely get creative and find other things to do. A lot of times, if you have two or more kids together, you're not going to really have to give them that many ideas. You might need to give them a couple of cardboard boxes, right? Or, some clay or crayons, markers, or a dog, and really just, let them play. So one of the most important things we can do for our kids' development is unstructured free play, and let them just go. Now, if you have a child who has been using the screen more than you realized was healthy, and you're now pulling that back, and there's this sort of transition period, a few days, a week, where your child is like, I don't know what to do, I'm bored, and you can tell that they're kind of, looking for that passive engagement, with the screen. There's a great organization called letgrow.org, and they have a parent section you can print out all sorts of worksheets and lists of things to do, like seasonally, activities for more independence as they get older. So you could get tons of ideas on that site, and I really love it, and I've used it with my kids and lots of clients.
I've never heard of the website, so I'll have to check it out. Seems
Yeah,
cool.
I love it. They're great.
One question is framed in such a way that it sounds like this parent has engaged with some of the opportunities we've provided this year, and
Great.
that you've led. And so she wants more information on something you said in one of the in-person sessions, which was about not giving phones or devices as birthday gifts, and asking for a little more insight as to why giving devices as a gift would maybe not be a good idea.
I'm so glad that this parent is bringing this up. Yeah. Part of that is telling grandparents, don't give devices as holiday gifts or birthday gifts, because, unless you've really had a clear discussion together that, okay, you as a parent agree that this is the time for that device, that this is coming up. So I really believe that parents should be giving smartphones in particular when it is developmentally appropriate at the right stage. So if it is middle school, right, but their birthday is the previous February, now I hear a lot of parents saying this, oh, we're going to give it to them for middle school. It's fifth grade. Their birthday's coming up. Why don't we just do the phone for their birthday? So I don't like that, because now you're giving them a device really before is the proper, timing in terms of that milestone. I also think when you give a device as a big, exciting birthday present, it has like this, this like confetti all around it all the time. Like, this is such a special, magical thing in your life. And I really think it should be more, thought of more like a tool, like, like a calculator, obviously it's much cooler and more exciting than that. But it's really a tool that they're going to use in their lives. And it is very different than, like I heard a parent tell me that they changed their mind about the phone for the birthday. And instead they're going to a Broadway show, like, I love that. Or, we're taking a special trip and we're marking the birthday with that experience. I think giving your kids experiences as gifts is an amazing thing to do for them. And in my opinion, as a professional and as a parent, opens up these opportunities for more bonding, more conversation, lots of memories. And so save the phone, for, that milestone when you think it is the appropriate time in their lives.
A few questions, Lauren, were about self-esteem and the ways in which, because I guess having a phone carries with it, and social media, a certain type of social capital to young people, that if they don't have one, that it affects their self-esteem, that they think of themselves as less than. So a couple kind of powerful questions were about ideas for encouraging like self-esteem building in the household in ways that don't tie self-worth to whether or not you have a phone.
Mm. It's a great question. And I think it really points to the issue we have as a culture right now that, so many kids place so much value on, not just the phone, but on a social media brand, really. It's like their account becomes like who they are, right, on social media and in the world. And when I was talking to a student yesterday, they were pointing this out, that their presence on social media spills over into the lunchroom, for example. Like who you were in a group chat with becomes maybe your lunch table, or how many likes you got on a post is now talked about. So it really is a part of their world. So the first thing I just want to say is I really, am dedicated to working together with our communities and the larger campaign to delay smartphones for middle schoolers. And I'm hoping that in the next decade, we can really make progress doing that, because no pre-adolescent, that really critical, 11 to 14-year-old, those years when their brains are really changing and wiring up all the ways they think about themselves in the world, it would really be wonderful if they didn't have to feel the pressures and their self-worth didn't have to be tied to whether or not they had a presence. Now, that being said, what I really encourage parents to do in the home, and I love this question was about the home, is to make sure that your child feels useful in your family. That many of the teenagers that I've spoken with over the years feel anxiety and depression and feel that they don't have a purpose, right? It is so important for kids to feel useful in the home. So what might that look like? Simple chores, first of all, right? That we want every child and teenager to have chores that happen regularly, and that they know you need their help doing that. So when my 16-year-old son, needs to drag the recycling out and there's a lot of cardboard boxes this week and he's sort of like moaning about it, I say to him, thank you so much for doing it, because I'm really tired right now. Dad's not here. It's a big help. It really is. So he does it, and then he feels good that he was a part of running this family and running this household. So that's, really important that they're doing chores. It could be fun things like helping to plan family vacations, deciding on what color to paint, the deck, et cetera, like get them really involved in those adult decisions. They do love it. And the other piece of that is getting them taking healthy risks and adventures out in the world too. So asking them, like, what's something you might want to do this weekend that you've never done before? Something that is exciting to you. For a middle schooler, it might be like, walking to a friend's house without a parent, or going to the mall without a parent, walking around with them. For a high schooler, it might be something more adventurous, going skiing and not having the parents there, with them the whole time, right? Something like that. So we want to make sure that the real world is very exciting and rewarding. And one sure way to do that is to get them taking independent adventures. Once they have a sense that their worth is tied to these other accomplishments in their lives and these other experiences, even if they're not accomplishments, just having fun out in the world, you're going to see that boost in self-worth, self-confidence, and self-esteem.
Two things that are resonating with me, and I realized you and I have had quite a few conversations over the years, and I've never asked you this question. Do you think children should be compensated for chores?
That's a fun question. I know people have asked me that.
Yeah.
I really think it's just depends on your family, and I don't think you
Sure.
can go wrong either way.
Okay.
So I've had some parents say to me, I don't want to give them, an allowance money because I just want them to know that this is a part of running our home.
Right.
And then other families see the value in it because it gives them an opportunity to then learn about spending. So I do give my kids a weekly allowance for doing their chores. And then, and it's most applicable to my 16-year-old. When he's out in the world with his friends, he uses that fund, with his allowance to buy his food and his t-shirts and whatever he wants to do. So he gets that experience of deciding how to spend his money, which I do like. And, so I build it in that way.
Yeah. I like your middle of the road answer there.
It's really, there are benefits to both.
Something else when you were speaking earlier that I wanted to take up a little bit, you talked a bit about independent adventures and maybe some advice or some thinking out loud here, Lauren, about how parents might try to quell their own anxieties about that or
Yeah.
assuage concerns. My wife and I have a friend, and they put Apple Tag things on their daughter's shoelaces, right? So that when she's riding her bike, they know where she is. And, you know, I get that. And it seems problematic too. So, how
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
adults can we kind of address those fears we have and then maybe not superimpose them on our kids so as to limit their opportunities for these independent adventures?
Yeah. It's a great question. And it's really important for us.
Yeah.
So, like I think it was like in the 90s, where a lot of parents got really scared that their kids were going to get abducted. There were some high profile cases, but the reality is that our communities are incredibly safe. Crime rates have been dropping for decades. And in most of the communities that we're living in, there is a very low crime rate, and our kids are safe. And so because of, the drama that we sometimes see in media, and it gets really exaggerated in our minds, we have overprotected our kids. And the majority of families that I've worked with over the years have overprotected their kids, unintentionally. Their intention is to be a great parent. But there is, I think, a resulting harm in that our kids don't have enough independence and therefore develop anxiety themselves about getting out in the world and doing things. And so we are really, we need to reevaluate as parents our own fears and our beliefs. Are they really rational? I have committed to working with some of my younger daughter's friends' parents to give them more independence. So, for example, when the time was right for her to ride her bike alone in the neighborhood a year or so ago, I found one of her friend's moms, and I said, I'm ready to let them ride. Are you? And she said, okay. And so we showed up with the bike at the door and rang the doorbell, and the mom and the daughter came out. And she said, actually, my husband's going to go with them. And my daughter and her friend, their face just dropped. They were so disappointed. And I said, oh, really? I thought we were going to let them go. And the mom was like, oh, should we? And I said, yeah, right. She just needed to know that I really was comfortable with it and that it was okay to say they can go on their own. We gave them some guidelines. Here's how you cross the road. Only go this far, come back when you think it's been an hour or so. And they did great, right? So with the example you gave, of parents putting Apple tags on their kids, or, giving, an 8 or 9-year-old a smartwatch so they can call if they have a problem. Let's say, your kid goes out and gets a flat tire. Okay. And they're in the neighborhood, right? Because they're not riding 10 miles away. They're within a half a mile.
Mm-hmm.
If they have a smartwatch, they're calling and you are going to rescue them. What would happen if they don't have a smartwatch? They are now in a very critical situation where they have to figure out how to get home with the bike. They need to be resourceful. They need to be brave. They need to talk it out with the friend that they're with. They need to walk and walk and walk and drag the bike. They need to have all these really important experiences that develop coping skills, that develop courage, that develop a sense of self-efficacy, which is like, I'm capable of taking care of things in the world. And so my biggest concern with sending kids out with these devices is that you actually block them from having the opportunity for all these ways that they need to grow up. And it's fun and exciting. It might be a little bit scary, but those are the best memories that they're going to have, right? Those moments. So I encourage parents to let go a little bit, of that fear, and to, if they need to take it in small steps, take it in small steps. Maybe you let them ride around the block without an Apple tag, and you stand in front of the house and they ride around a few times and you realize they got this, and then the next time you expand the radius. But to your point, if we don't, then our fears and anxieties become theirs. And we don't want to raise kids that are overly cautious and anxious. They will not be happy and successful in the world.
We educators would call that scaffolding, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Perfect.
Can you talk a little bit more about self-efficacy?
Yeah, self-efficacy is this feeling that I can be powerful in the world, that I can have an impact myself. There's a great book called Raising Adults. Is it called Raising Adults? And the author talks about how we have a lot of parents have created this checklist childhood where they say to their child, and this is usually more applicable to high schoolers where they're getting ready to set their kids up for success in the real world, but they give them these checklists. Did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do your homework? Did you talk to your teacher? Did you, think about who you're getting for a letter of recommendation? Check, 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 check. But when we do that to our kids, we take away all these opportunities for them to really have a more free-flowing thought process around how to develop those types of skills. If we send them off to college having created all their checklists for them, they don't know how to do it themselves. So one really important way that kids and teens need to develop self-efficacy is by messing up, is by making mistakes. So when your kid comes home with a grade that is not typical of them, or they missed a deadline to sign up for a club, et cetera, we need to really check our own emotional response, because, I'm guilty of it too. I might be like, oh, they missed the opportunity, right? To be great or to look great. But for them, they actually have created an opportunity to learn and grow. So we want them to mess up in middle school and high school, so that hopefully when they get to college, and it actually might mean more, that they've learned from their mistakes and they know how to do it differently.
We often hear, bringing it back to phones and screens, that no matter how hard parents try to navigate or mitigate some of these challenges, that the technology is developing so quickly and the apps are emerging so quickly that parents have a hard time keeping up, that young people can always find workarounds, and that there's always one more new app. So I'm thinking about some of the questions here and trying to thematize them in the bucket that I just tried to make there.
Yeah, go ahead.
How can parents keep up with the latest apps, and how can we ensure that we're at least aware of the workarounds, and how do we keep up in, right? Technology culture is kind of pop culture, which is kind of youth culture, right? Kids are always blazing those trails faster than adults can.
Yeah.
So how do we keep up and sort of immerse ourselves into that youth culture, pop culture?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, the best way to educate yourself about it is to ask your kids to tell you about it, So ask them what they're doing, what are their favorite apps. And you're not doing it as like a spy investigator. You're doing it, as their parent. You're curious about their lives. So ask them what they're using and how it works. You're not going to be able to know everything. You're not going to have your finger on the pulse of everything going on, and it's okay. You want to have a really healthy, influential relationship with your child, because that they're going to respect your values and your guidelines and talk to you about things. And that's how you're going to help them navigate challenging situations. So it's not really trying to police every single thing they're doing. That's not it at all. It's helping to create healthy boundaries so that they have good habits. But then it's also about this open relationship and talking to them about things, watching funny videos with them, playing some video games with them, being a part of that world. So you know what it's about, and some of the nuances, and then those questions to ask them. There are other great resources like Common Sense Media. Many parents probably know it's a great resource. If you hear about an app or a movie or something, you could just look it up and see what the deal is with it. Is this something I should be really concerned about? Apps to be really concerned about are ones that are these like anonymous apps that that connect people to strangers, and there could be predators using those apps. So those are the types of things we would have clear lines about. We wouldn't want our kids to have. Most of it is trending stuff and videos that they're watching.
What are your thoughts, Lauren, on technology as teaching tools? So in classrooms, here we are saying be mindful of the amount of time kids are in front of a screen, but we give them Chromebooks, or they're in front of a Promethean board or smart board. And so there's a couple questions here about technology is being used as teaching tools, right? We're using YouTube videos or Khan Academy videos, or, my kids do them in their home school of like brain breaks that are dancing based, but that's still in front of a screen. I guess the question there is all screen time created equally, and how might parents navigate, right, the amount of screen time they use in school, or that they're part of at school versus at home?
Yeah, great questions. There's a couple things there I'd want to address. I have a program I do for school professionals. In particular, I was with at a conference for special ed educators, and we're talking about using tech in the classroom. And really, it can be an incredible tool, but it could also be a trap. And we all experience that in our personal and professional lives. So I think the conversation in terms of the way educators are using technology is that it's very intentional, that they're showing a YouTube video because it would be very hard for them to demonstrate that themselves. Maybe it's a science experiment that they don't have the equipment for, right? Or that they're using a program because it really does enhance or speed up the learning process for students. But that we are avoiding the trap, which is, once the Chromebooks open, it can be really easy for them to say, like, I just want to, play the math game, right? That might not be the best way for them to use the time. So we have to be really thoughtful about how we're using the technology. I am very big on hands-on learning at all ages. I'm looking at colleges right now for my junior, and I'm very interested in colleges that are talking about experiential learning. I think that's definitely important. And the technology can sometimes get in the way, I think, of screen-based learning. Of hands-on learning. The screen-based learning can get in the way of the hands-on learning. I think there's a lot of value in hands-on learning, especially for young kids. I see a lot of young boys who really struggle in the traditional classroom. I think they in particular, need more moving around, but all kids do. So, I want to just answer the second half of the question where we thought about are all screens created equal in our homes? And so a really great guide I like to tell parents is the bigger, the better. It's like really easy just to remember that. The bigger, the better. If your kids are watching your big TV in your family room, that's better. They're watching it maybe together. You hear what's going on. You can talk about it, laugh about it. They can see the world around them in between themselves and the screen. They might see a bird fly by, right? Or see the dog walk by. So they're still connected to the real world. The smaller the screen gets, the more they get lost in it, the more they're detached from the real world, the easier it is for them to go down a rabbit hole of either just passive content, or as they get older, if they're on social media, they can go down a rabbit hole of harmful content that you're not aware of, right? So the bigger the better, especially for the younger kids. There's no need for them to be on the smaller devices. And if you have a choice between an iPad and a TV, put them on the TV.
Yeah. When you're watching a movie too, you're following a plot, right? You're looking at elements of fiction or learning something from a documentary. There's a storyline. There's a lot of crossover skills, I think, that you engage in when you're viewing something as when you're making and producing too.
That's absolutely true. And that's a great point. So the longer the content, the better, right? So the bigger the screen, the better, the longer the content, the better. And my daughter was homesick last week, and she was gonna, watch some programming, and I said to her, you can watch movies. You can watch movies all day. I did not want her sitting on YouTube the whole day. We already have a limit during the week of how much she does it. And she said, okay. And she watched like 3 movies, and it was great. And, we talked about it, and she didn't have that, that glazed over look that they sometimes get if they watch YouTube for a little too long.
Yeah. Schools are, right, the maker movement that started at Columbia in the 90s. Schools have only just recently, in the past few decades, began to implement through maker spaces and design challenges. So your conversation about experiential learning and like problem-based learning really resonated with me, and the ways in which we like design instruction for kids in schools.
Yeah.
There's definitely something there to hold space for. Yeah.
Great to hear.
Can you talk more about, there's a question here, I think you spoke about it a bit already, but maybe taking a deeper dive might be helpful, about kids who only want to do things if they're perfect at it.
Okay.
It's kind of maybe making more complicated the notion of like fixed mindset versus growth mindset. I think like most people understand that.
Yeah.
Easier said than done. So maybe if you could talk through the nuances of that a bit, it might be helpful.
Yeah. And that's such an important topic, this, perfectionism. Like there's that other great book by Jennifer Wallace, The Toxic Achievement Culture, so we all feel this pressure that we want to set our kids up for this great success. But we get lost in it. We really do. Because we know, if you look at the longest longitudinal study out of Harvard University, I love quoting this one, the biggest predictor of lifelong health and happiness is healthy relationships. So we want to have healthy relationships with our kids. We want them to have healthy relationships. That's going to be a bigger predictor than their grades, their AP tests, what college they go to, or even how much money they have in the bank, right? So that's really important to remember. So we want our kids to experience healthy striving, right? But they certainly don't need to be perfect, and they're not going to get perfect scores, be the best, at everything. And we need to just tell that straight up. It's really helpful to tell your kids about times where you messed up, where you made mistakes, where you didn't win. That helps them to really internalize that that's normal, that's good, right? They love you, respect you. They see you're a healthy, stable adult. So they know, oh, okay, in order for me to get there, I can mess up. I don't have to get all these, perfect grades and have these perfect standards. And so, you mentioned growth versus fixed mindset. The easiest way to remember growth mindset is to remember one word, and that is yet, Y-E-T. So if your kid says like, oh, I can't draw, a dog, you say yet. You can't draw it yet because you just haven't practiced, that's it. Or I can't figure out how to do this math problem yet. We just have to work on it. You have to work on it. And sometimes you will, and sometimes you won't. So, parents remember that word yet. And then the other piece that comes with this is making sure that you focus on celebrating hard work and effort and not on the results. So if you only get excited every time they get the A, you're teaching them and you're giving them that message that they're only worthy if they get the A. Right. But if you say to them, when they get the A, if you say to them, I knew you were studying really hard for that, and that's nice to see your hard work paid off. If they don't bring home the A, but you knew that they were working hard, you say to them, the grade doesn't matter to me. What matters is that you were working hard and you care, and I'm really proud of you for that. So let the grade go. The grades don't matter, right? we have to really give those clear messages to our kids, because there is a lot of pressure, in our culture, at school, whatever they're learning online, the climate. So those types of messages from parents will really transform how they're thinking about themselves.
Yeah, I appreciate that. A parent is asking about distractions. Yes, cell phones may be a distraction at home, screens may be a distraction at home, but any advice or resources for parents to help him learn tools for dealing with distractions and staying focused? So even if they're not motivated by technology.
So yeah, how to help manage a distracting mind.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, first of all, if it's the technology that's distracting them, which it has to be to some degree, I imagine, you want to make sure you're using the parent limits on those devices, whether it's an iPad or a phone or a computer. So when it comes to the Wi-Fi in your house, you have control, so your Wi-Fi will let you name each device in the house and put time limits on it. So my daughter's 11 years old. The Wi-Fi that goes to the laptop she uses goes off at 7:30 p.m. That's it. So sometimes at 7:30 p.m. I hear, "Aw," they cut her off. My son has a smartphone. The parent control on his phone, on school nights, it goes off at 9:30. That's the time we came up with together. That's it. He only has access to FaceTime and music after that. And I have the password, right? So it's really important to use those types of parents' controls so that technology is not distracting, because if we don't do it, they're not going to self-regulate themselves. The devices and the apps are all designed so that they don't self-regulate, right? They're all really engaging. They're using behavior science to figure out how to keep us all on as long as possible, and it works. In terms of distractibility, outside of technology, depending on your child's age, I think you need to just really observe what's going on. If they're young and they're just the type of kid, that is not great at sitting and reading a book, for 30 minutes, but can do it for 10 minutes and then wants to move on, that might be your child and their stage of development. Obviously, if you think that there's something going on that's not developmentally appropriate, then, I want parents to, reach out to their, pediatricians and professionals and start asking, questions about, is this type of distractibility typical? And what can we do about it? I think in general, what we're seeing in preteens and adolescents is what we call attention fragmentation, which means they are having trouble focusing, in part because of devices, short form videos, et cetera. So if we can limit that type of content in their lives to about 2 hours, we're going to see a shift in the way their brains work.
Yeah, that makes sense. As we come to the end of our time, I just wanted to address and share with you where we are as a district in our conversations around cell phones. That certainly was a trending topic in the feedback form that we sent out. So the district continues to take a sort of thoughtful approach to cell phone use, ensuring that our regulations are well monitored and adaptable. And so over the past year, we've done a lot of work and examined issues from a lot of different angles, including a parent community survey, which I believe was sent out in the spring of 24, digital wellness sessions, as I mentioned at the top of our time together, screenagers viewing and follow-up discussions. And then in partnership with you today, Lauren, we addressed community-specific questions. We've also reviewed local district policies around cell phones in schools, which mostly align with our current practices, which are away for the day in grades pre-K through 8, and often away during instructional time in grades 9 through 12. We believe with our protocols and processes now, we have pretty strong compliance. You and Mr. Lawler also, I think yesterday, led student focus groups, and I've also had the opportunity, which was fantastic, to meet with high school students and parents advocating for different ways to respond to these concerns. So currently the BOE's Personnel and Policy Committee is reviewing draft language from our policy provider. Our existing practices already meet Governor Murphy's call for formalized policies, but best practices and any changes we may want to make to those policies and regulations need to be codified. And so we imagine that happening over the next few months. Looking ahead, we know that related work we have to do is to assess curriculum alignment with topics around digital wellness, because I feel really strongly that banning something or even heavily regulating it doesn't mitigate the need to teach about it. So schools as learning institutions need to concern themselves with teaching into these issues, not just to ban, regulate, or manage them. And granted, those things aren't mutually exclusive, but they're equally important. And so too is teacher input, and we're looking at that currently. So we'll continue to aim for a balanced approach that minimizes digital distractions while supporting student learning, and more to come. Yeah.
Great
As
to
we
hear.
wrap up here, Lauren, what what ideas or concepts or things to think about do you want to leave us with?
Well, I think what I want to leave you with is, just really returning to that point of the healthy parent-child relationship is the most important piece. And that's at the core of all of this, right? So spending time with your kids, having fun, listening to them, creating space to talk and connect, getting out in the world on adventures together, device free, often so that you can be engaged in the world with them. And then you're going to be able to implement some of these important boundaries and guidelines for your kids. Most important being, limit that time down to an hour to 2 a day, have those parent controls on the devices so that you don't leave it up to them to try to self-regulate, which is really challenging. And have fun together as much as you can.
Thanks, Lauren. It's always really great talking to you. Always such great advice and lots of things for us to think about. And we really appreciate all the different ways you've partnered with us throughout the entire year, this school year.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to be a partner. If anyone wants to find me online, wellbeingtherapycenter.com is my therapy center.